Today I am covering one of the most infamous Hong Kong Category 3s of all time, that being the Untold Story. This is also the film that introduced me to that wonderful world of sleazy goodness. It of course has a lot in common with many other Cat 3s, especially since this one was so influential. Police procedures, which of course lead to police brutality, gambling, and of course my personal favorite, Anthony Wong being the equivalent of a human jar of Vaseline. And most of the infamy of this film comes from one particular scene that I will get to later because it's not very family friendly. The film starts in Hong Kong, and we already get some yelling. We get two of our characters, one of them played by Anthony Wong. His name is Wong. That makes the writing easier, I guess. And he's having a very intense argument about the other person owing him money, which of course he won by gambling and mahjong, which is a very common trope in Cat 3 films. And well, the yelling too is quite the trope in Cat 3 films. In Cat 3 movies, most of the dialogue is told through characters yelling at each other and calling themselves dickheads. And well, Anthony Wong's character has quite the dog in him. That dog being a complete psychopath who just decides to murder the other person. We then get to see him burning his Hong Kong ID card, and then we get the title sequence. And this film is of course produced by legendary Danny Lee, who is also in the film and plays the character Officer Lee. Again, I guess it makes it easier when you're trying to remember your lines. Anyways, we then get another common trope in Hong Kong films, kids playing. But this time, instead of seeing their parents fuck, which is also a common trope in Cat 3 films, they find parts of dead bodies at sea, which of course causes them to freak out because they're little brats, which leads their mother or grandmother, I don't know, she looks quite old to be their mother, to call the police. And that's where we meet our ragtag team of cops, who, if you're not familiar with Cat 3 films, the cop often bring the comedy, because yes, there is comedy in this film, which if you're not expecting comedy, and with this film's infamy, why would you? It's quite shocking the first time you watch this movie. And that rag team of cops is made up of 3 guys and 1 gal, and they are quite the horny bunch. All of them. The boys are horny, mainly because Officer Lee always has a hot babe with him any scene he's in, except when the movie starts getting serious, and well, the lady character named Bo, well, she wants the attention of the other police officers, but mainly she's horny for Officer Lee. Anyways, they're all debating on who's gonna go get the body parts. Eventually they're like, hey, Bo, you're the youngest one, go get him, girl. Which she does, and that leads to slapstick comedy. Eventually, Officer Lee shows up and tells his group to bag up the body parts and go back to the office, because they will try to get some fingerprints out of that. In the meanwhile, we return to Anthony Wong's character, who now owns a restaurant in Macau. And you're probably thinking to yourself, damn, he really started at the bottom, now he's at the top, owning a restaurant, having employees, still being a gambling addict. But he's having a hard time running the restaurant because he doesn't have much staff, and he's looking for employees, which he finds one, and his interview process is just him showing Anthony Wong that he can cut meat. Is that all what it takes to get a job? I mean, when I had my first job at 18 at A&W, the interview process was kind of similar. They were like, can you start a timer? Which I responded, yes. Are you high right now? No. Want to start tomorrow? Oh, go. And since he can cut meat, Anthony Wong hires him on the spot. A decision that man will later regret. There's also the cashier / server that's, I don't know, there. Well, she won't be there for long, because, Anthony Wong's character is a fucking psychopath and he likes to murder people. Anyways.
I really like it.
Yes, sir. 你介紹完自己未啊？
介紹完啦。 Yes, sir.
And the film will bounce back between Anthony Wong and the police doing their police procedures. Which the police procedure scenes always have comedy in them, and then the Anthony Wong scenes, well, they get pretty serious. During that time, the police are loosely doing their investigation. You can see that they're bits of slackers, and they get a letter from mainland China. That letter is somebody asking for the cops' help because they haven't received any letters or any news or any money from their brother who owned a restaurant in Macau. The police, since they're incompetent, just, you know, forget about that, and it's kind of important to the story, but you know, Cat 3 police officers are rarely smart, and eventually they'll get some results from the fingerprints, which will lead them to one of the family members from one of the owners of the 8 Immortals restaurant. During that time, Anthony Wong is trying to get the ownership of the restaurant officially. He tells the lawyer that he bought it, but you know, the original owners just left. And the lawyer, of course, doesn't want to do anything because, bruh, that's illegal. To which Anthony Wong answers, come on, I'll pay you. The lawyer's like, man, really think I need your money? I'm a fucking lawyer. Later on, Anthony Wong is gambling, and he's of course cheating, but don't tell him that he's cheating because he will get quite upset. And that's the error that his employee does. He confronts him about his cheating, and Anthony Wong brutally fucking murders him. By the way, the uncensored version of this video will be on my Patreon. And what he does with his corpse, don't worry, he doesn't do anything sexual, at least not yet, is that he chops off the body and grinds it into a meat paste to put it in his barbecue pork steam buns. If you like pork steam buns, trust me, you won't after watching this movie. The police eventually get leads that brings them to Anthony Wong's restaurant. At first they go without Danny Lee, which is always a mistake because, again, Officer Lee is the only competent one of the gang, even if he's just screwing prostitutes all night long.
Sir, 我諗點都好過你睇返嚟嗰啲。
And they start asking questions. But due to them being absolute morons, they get distracted by the fact that Anthony Wong's steamed buns are apparently very yummy. Bo is asking questions to the server, and the server mentions that sometimes they get letters from mainland China, which Anthony Wong gets upset, makes up something, and the police are on their way. Not before giving them a bunch of free steam buns though, which they gladly eat in the police station. They will come to later regret that decision. And let me tell you, Anthony Wong isn't a fan of his server saying stuff to the police. She talks to him later that night about how she wants to quit because her mother is feeling sick, which at first Anthony Wong acts like he understands her situation. But since he's got that dog in him, he brutally murders her too, and does naughty bits to her before doing so. And let's just say that the chopsticks used in this scene? Yep. Everybody talks about the final sequence of this movie when they're talking about how fucked up it is, but trust me, this scene also is very, very messed up. The police are still blundering the investigation, but Officer Lee decides that it's time to take this shit seriously. He goes back to the restaurant to ask questions, which leads him to go into Wong's apartment that is upstairs in the restaurant. Danny Lee sees a lot of things wrong with the apartment, one of them being that there are still family pictures from the people who apparently are now immigrating to Canada. Anthony Wong denies everything, and Officer Lee goes back to the office knowing that something is up. So he tells his ragtag team of idiots to stay on surveillance at Anthony Wong's restaurant. And then they see Anthony Wong close the restaurant as soon as the cops leave, and then later that night throw something in the garbage. So Bo and Robert, who is another one of the police officers, is also very orny and he's quite the ladies' man. He tries to seduce every hooker that Officer Lee brings to the office. Anyways, they're looking at Anthony Wong throwing something in the garbage, and they do nothing about it because, again, they're absolute fucking morons.
頭先抌嗰啲垃圾啊，可能係重要證物嚟㗎。
They talk on the CB, and then Officer Lee shows up to again save the day. They tell him that Anthony Wong just threw out his garbage, to which he answers, "Well, look through his goddamn garbage." But the truck has already left, so they have to hot pursuit the truck. And they find some evidence. They find the ex-owner's IDs and passports in the garbage. This is enough to arrest Anthony Wong's character, which they will do, and like in any good Category 3 film, they beat the living shit out of him to get a confession. But this time it doesn't work since the media is in the corridor of the police station. Anthony Wong, not being a complete idiot, kind of takes advantage of the police's stupidity and he runs out of the office. And he shows that he's been beaten up, which of course causes controversy in the Macau newspapers. They need to reinvent the wheel of police brutality. And unlike in Dr. Lamb, where they use the man's family because he has none, what they do is they send him to jail with the ex-owner's brother. And everybody in the jail proceed to beat the shit out of him until he tries to commit self-death and then he is hospitalized. And again, he doesn't want to confess, so they keep him awake for like 3 days until he's so goofy that he confesses to his crime. And that is where this movie's infamy comes up. You see, he murdered the entire family of the ex-owner. Him, his wife, and his 5 or 6 children, I think? And we see all of that in bloody details. This movie doesn't shy away from anything that the main character does, and yeah, it's fucking messed up. And then the confession sends him to jail again, and Anthony Wong completes his mission of committing self-death. The end. So, what do I think of The Untold Story, which, by the way, not a sponsor, but if you want to see this in beautiful high definition, get yourself the Unearthed Films Blu-ray because it's beautiful, and you can also rent it on their site if I'm not mistaken, so you should do that because this movie, as I've said, is fucking incredible. It's one of my favorite Cat 3s, and at first I wasn't super high on it. I always loved it, but this time when I watched it, it's a 10 out of 10. This is a perfect, sleazy exploitation film. You can't get much better than that. It has everything. It is extremely messed up in content, it is extremely messed up in execution, and it's just over-the-top brutality for the sake of over-the-top brutality, but it doesn't feel like it's trying to be edgy. Now, obviously, culturally, I do not get this film. I am not a man from Hong Kong. I am a guy from Canada. So, to me, if this movie criticizes politics or anything, I can't really get it. All I know is that the theme of police idiocy is quite common in these movies. So is police brutality, so it makes me think that there is some sort of correlation between the filmmakers trying to say something about the situation of Hong Kong policing. Also, this film is based on a true story, just like our previous sleazy Hong Kong film that we've covered on this channel, Human Pork Chop, but this one is a bit more fun than that other one. It is weird to say that this movie is fun, especially considering the content of this movie, but it has a lot of comedy. Anyways, Untold Story is a fucking masterpiece. Everybody should have watched this at least once in their lives, and yeah, have a good one.